Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Goblins and Growlers Podcast. I'm Josh Palpy at Black Cloak DM.
I'm Brandon Dingus at Way of Brandalore. How are you doing, Josh?
I'm well. I have been significantly busier than I would like to be, but, that is a little bit the life of being a manager in IT.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you are watching the video version of this and you see me just like rubbing my eye constantly, it's because my allergies have just absolutely knocked me on my ass for the last 3 or 4 days. And then on top of that, I was camping this weekend and slept outside. So I've done myself no favors in this situation. But enough banter before Scott yells at us for boring complaints at the beginning.
Scott does not yell at us. You stop that.
Real quick at the top, do us a favor, subscribe to the YouTube if you haven't already. Lots of people have, but please, more people do. Sign up for the monthly newsletter, and you can get the link to that at our Linktree, linktr.ee/Goblins and Growlers. And then also sign up to the Patreon if you don't mind, because you can get early access to the audio version of the podcast, early access to the video version, and we do those deep dive episodes where we jump into other topics, like Josh hating MagFest, for example. And
what is all the falsehoods spilling out of your mouth today? That's
just wait till you see what goes up on the Patreon tomorrow. So it's sort of turning into a little bit of like a mini separate podcast, but we endeavor to try to go into more depth on things we talk about on the regular podcast. So check that out. And what are we talking about today, Josh?
Today we are talking about the I still hate how it's named, the 2024 Core Rulebooks Dungeon Master's Guide.
And the notable thing about this is it's the last 2024 core rulebook to come out, because the next one doesn't come out until 2025, even though it's the 2024 Monstrous Manual.
Yeah, so this book is coming out in November, or the end of October if you are a affiliate game store or subscribed to D&D Beyond at a certain level.
Mm-hmm.
It's coming out November 12th or October 29th, depending on the circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be $50 for the physical print, $30 for the digital version on D&D Beyond, $60 for both together. Still no option as of yet for people who are buying the physical book in your friendly local gaming store to add the digital bundle on there. But
in fairness, when you talk to them about that, it seemed like they were giving you a little bit of the runaround in terms of timing on it.
They did not have a committed timeline in mind. I just like to bring this up as a reminder that it is something I'm still paying attention to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, once they finish printing out those like million individualized QR codes that they're going to have to put in all of the books that they send out, I'm sure they'll get right on top of that.
Look, all I want them to do is bring back the concept of the video game CD key, but it gives you a digital version of the book on D&D Beyond.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're trying to make people digital first, so I can see why they'd want to do some foot dragon on this one. Foot Dungeons and Dragon. Waka waka.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's that kind of day. It
is that kind of day. I agree.
But yeah, so preface this with our usual non-journalistic stuff. We do not have early access to the DMG because we're not that high up on the radar. So what we have instead done is collected information from others about what's in it. And, a lot of it is stuff we've talked about before in the lead up to the actual releases of these things, when we were sort of still in speculation mode from PAX Unplugged last year up until the 2024 PHB came out. So some of this will be new and interesting, some of it won't. But such is the nature of podcasting, that we're just going to speculate and give well-rounded, informed opinions on everything without edging into hyperbole, I promise. Such as Josh hates MagFest.
Is this the end of Dungeons and Dragons as we know it? Like, no, it's just not our style.
Yeah.
watch. Now you're going to take that one shot of me like holding my temples with the wide eyes, and you're going to put that as the little banner image for YouTube. I can.
It would be easier if we were
now,
recording
Brandon.
this. It would be easier if we were recording this in 4K to be able to do that off a screen cap. But I'll see what I can come up with.
So obviously this is still 5e compatible, which makes it continually weird that it's not 5.5e, but it is instead the 2024 core rulebooks.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to be some stuff that stays relatively the same, but it sounds like the new DMG is supposed to have a ludicrous amount of stuff that has changed from 2014 to now, which honestly I respect, because a lot of people I know, you included, have told me, yeah, I never use the DMG for literally anything.
No, because it just doesn't have enough that I want. And before I forget, I want to mention something that I just realized. The book releases to the public on November 12th, 2024, which is the 69th anniversary of the famous Hill Valley lightning storm. So don't forget, celebrate Back to the Future Day when this comes out.
Oh, I was like, that reference sounds familiar, but I'm not placing it for some reason.
Come on, Josh. November 12th, 1955. It might be the causal nexus for the entire space-time continuum. Or it might just be an amazing coincidence.
That's so often how things go with the space-time continuum. Is this the center of the universe and everything? Or is it maybe just a funny happenstance?
All right. Back to Dungeons and Dragons.
And the future.
As with many things that come out of my mouth, I'm sure Craig will appreciate that, but other people, I'm not so sure.
Hey, you know what? Know your audience.
Yeah, exactly. We're marketing toward a very, very specific, tight demo and customer profile.
It's just Craig. We're just marketing to Craig. It's great.
Goblins and Growlers Podcast.
Oh God.
But yeah, anyway, so I don't use the DMG for Jack, and I haven't used it in forever, and I don't even know where my copy of the 2024 DMG is at this moment. However, I am excited for this new version of the DMG because, as I've said a bunch of times in some of our previous recordings, like, all I want is for them to make it a useful tool, because up to now it's really felt, and I'm thinking back even to like second edition, it's just felt like something that you might need for a couple of months while you get your legs under you as a GM, and then you immediately cast it to the side. It has felt more like a way for them to make an extra, at the time, $30. Now, like $50 off of you. What's the price on this?
It is $30 for the digital edition, $50 for the physical edition, $60 for the bundle.
Right. The digital first bundle. But yeah, I have never found a lot of value in the DMG, and it, with the way culturally sort of I say culturally, I don't mean sort of like broadly in the zeitgeist, but sort of internally with Wizards of the Coast and the D&D subunit of Wizards of the Coast. Like, culturally, it feels like over the past 10 years, they've really just sort of opened themselves up to the possibility of bringing more people in, and they're starting to operate a little bit more as an inclusive company and thinking, how do we get more people into the hobby? And I think what it sounds like they're planning to do with this 2024 DMG is the right step there, because it actually turns it into an educational tool, a reference manual for folks who maybe have been afraid to run a game before, maybe didn't feel like they had enough experience or information, because like that kind of thinking appeals to me, because I'm the kind of person who rarely attempts something until I'm sure I have an overwhelming amount of knowledge about it, so I can pivot as needed. It's like, as I've gotten older, there's less and less of that, as a combination of life experience and give no fucks has stepped to the fore, and I don't sweat stuff as much as I used to. But having something like this 15, 20 years ago for me would have been really valuable and would have helped me sort of overcome those mental or anxiety oriented hurdles that I had, like stepping into GMing. Because I sometimes I just need to be walked through stuff and I need to feel like I'm supported. And I never felt like the DMGs of old were very supportive. The caveat there is I really just kind of skipped 3, 3.5, and 4. So I could be telling, all kinds of falsehoods about those. But the sense I get is that is not the case. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking in such like revelatory terms about the changes that they're making with this one. But that's the sort of my introductory setup for this.
Yeah, I think it sounds to me like what Wizards wants to do is make this a lot more of a reference material guide that step by step takes you through creating your own adventures, making your own homebrew stuff, like these sorts of things, which I think is wise because that's what a lot of people end up inevitably doing anyway. And then it also includes things like the Greyhawk campaign setting. It's got some rules for some more like niche concepts that might go into your game, such as bastions. And then on top of that, as we are accustomed to, it's got like the items, the treasure, the tables for rolling on those, the magic item descriptions, those sorts of things. So I think the way it's set should help a lot as far as making it a little more useful to the average GM, because even if you are fairly experienced, then you've still got things like the Greyhawk setting guide, which will be helpful. You've still got the magic item tables and things like that. The thing that is new is I don't recall previous DMGs having a whole lot in the way of things like traps.
They would maybe have like for traps, they would maybe have like a page of it to the best of my recollection. And it would just be types of traps, really. And then it would encourage you to dig into it a little bit more, which is fair for like sort of a book that's supposed to be like all encompassing about things. But I think we've both ranted a little bit over the last few months about how like, I'm not expecting Wizards to put out anything like Grimtooths or anything like that, but give me a little bit of variety. So I use this book for more than just one thing.
Exactly. So the whole thing with the traps that I thought was really interesting was that they're not just different traps from in previous DMGs. They are customizable so that you can adjust them to make more sense for whatever your situation may be. And it gives you some guidance on how to customize them, which in turn helps you building your own traps, which I'm all about. I think that sort of information is something that's massively useful that we could have had in previous DMGs ages ago that would have been a tremendous help to DMs everywhere.
Yeah, a couple of years ago when I wrote that all trap one-page dungeon, I was struggling there by the end. I think I had like 9 or 10 traps in a row on there, and I was getting like really creative, I think, with what I was defining as a trap. Like there was like a cheese moat or something eventually. But something that can help you, I guess, modularly build a trap. I think that would be helpful. And I don't know exactly if that's the direction they're going with this, but thinking about how in the PHB they've got this sort of newer focus on some of the optional crafting mechanics. Like I would like to see something like that for traps as well. So you can almost like, because if you make something modular, then it's a lot easier to convert it to a table. So then you can apply dice to it. So then I can roll like 4d6 and that can determine the various bits and bobs of my trap.
Right. Like you can have like a damage type table, a mechanism table. Like you could have like 4 or 5 different tables and then you just roll a pool of dice and that generates a trap for you. I've seen it in other books. I think, though, what this seems to be suggesting is that they're actually looking at helping you build your own traps conceptually, which is something I think a lot of GMs could use because it's easy to rip a trap from a different book, from a setting guide or something like that, and be like, I'm just going to use this particular poison trap in my dungeon. It's something entirely different to go, okay, here's the way you think about trap building, and here are the components that go into that.
Yeah, it's a difference between, you know, the knowing the mechanism and knowing the philosophy behind it, and being able to like get people over the hump on sort of the philosophy of trap design is going to be the thing that allows them to operate independently, rather than just like, okay, here's a trap, you can slot that into your dungeon.
Yeah, exactly. So that is one section of the book that I am particularly excited about, because it's something that I've been wanting for a long time and have had to go to third parties to get any reliable nature of. Like the Nord Games Treacherous Traps material is awesome. It is tremendous work, but it is very focused. So I can understand a lot of folks being like, what if I don't want to spend, I think it's $25 or $30 on a book that is just traps? What if I just want that to be a small subset of the things I'm spending money on?
Yeah, and like I never have a problem with anything Nord Games puts out. I think I've expressed some irritation with them, primarily like their primary publishing strategy is Kickstarter based or crowdfunding based, which irritates me a little bit, but you got to do what you got to do. And really, like, that's a secondary concern for me as long as they keep producing quality content. But I am the person who's like, I don't want to buy an extra book for like $30, right? Especially one that's maybe only about this thick, like, you know, like a quarter to a half inch, something like that. Not even a half inch, I don't think. It was a really thin book.
It's not a super thick book, but it is dense with material, because they've the way the book is set up, because that's one of the first Nord Games things I backed, because I was like, oh, I'm designing all these dungeons, but I trip over the concept of making traps. So something that is a resource that is just traps would help me tremendously.
Well, maybe one of the traps you need to put in your dungeon is a challenge for the adventuring party to design a trap, since you trip over it all the time.
That's it. It's brilliant.
The dungeon the dungeon is actually a dungeon creation workshop that the party has to get through. I'm gonna write that down.
Coming soon to a brewery game near you.
Yeah, I've got a pen over here. You keep talking. I'm gonna write that down.
Trademark. So I bought that book, and it is traps all the way from level 1 to level 20 that are basically like, hey, here are traps that are proper for the party that you are having go against them, as opposed to just being like, here is a series of traps and just mess with the damage dice or something. So I found a lot of value in the Nord Games book, but I can totally understand and respect someone being like, I'm not going to buy a book that's just traps. I'm not doing that. I might reference a book that's just traps, but I will never buy one.
But like the flip side of that is it depends on what you get for your value. Like $30 for Nord Games, that was a hard sell, but I was ultimately pleased with the book that I got. Or I could spend like $30, $40 and get one of those giant ass Grimtooth volumes that's got like 300 pages in it and like 200 and some traps.
Yeah, to be completely honest with the listening audience, I don't recall exactly what I spent on the Nord Games book, in part because I also bought all of the trap decks. So $30 might even be high. I don't know. That is one part of the DMG, the new one, that I'm really excited to see, because they're still going to have a section detailing out dungeon hazards, such as hot areas, cold zones, magic areas, things like that, which they have some of in the 2014 core rulebook DMG, which that is the one thing that I go back to that book for on a regular basis. Because things as they are right now, there's not a whole lot else I find all that useful, but they have rules for like, oh, if your characters are swimming and they're underwater for an extended period of time, here's the holding your breath rules. Here's what swim speeds are like if they don't have a swim speed as part of like their character sheet. Here is, how much they can go beyond holding their breath before they start to die, like these sorts of things, which it's not something I keep up here because I don't think about it that often. Why would I need to?
I'm making plans for us right now. I'll just go ahead and tell you this. We are going to get a couple of volumes of Grimtooths, and then we're going to talk about them and talk about the stupidest, ridiculous traps that are in them.
Okay, I like
especially like the paperback versions that came out in like the 80s. Like we can get those relatively cheap and used.
They won't quite be plug and play like Nord Games stuff is, but we'll still find ways to make them interesting.
Yeah. Hashtag not sponsored by Nord Games.
Look, I just felt like we were smack talking a very quality product a little bit. I wanted to be clear.
I wasn't smack
like
talking
the
it.
product.
I wasn't smack talking it. I just think like they better be for that price for a hardback that's that thin. Like it better be the best damn traps ever. That better be the most curated list I've ever seen. And
what I thought you were doing was pulling their prices up. I have bad news actually.
What's that?
It is a $40 book.
Inflation.
It is 173 pages though.
Ultimately,
it
I did say that I was happy with it.
Yeah. I also was happy with it. I just, like I said, I understand, especially a 173 page book that's just about traps. I understand being like, I don't know that I want to spend $40 on just traps.
Yeah.
That feels extreme. I remember a time in my life when I was like, if I'm getting reference books at all for my TTRPGs, they need to be owned by and paid for by the table.
I remember
this cannot be coming out of my pocket.
I remember those days very well. All right, let's get back to talking about another book that we're hoping we'll be pleased with.
Yeah, so something that they are adding is settlement tools for generating settlements, which is another thing that is really popular among third-party creators, which obviously WotC could have been getting a bite of that apple a long time ago and chose not to for no reason apparent to me. So it'll give you an idea of like, here's what you want a settlement generally to have, as well as some basic rules on creating settlements, which I think will be tremendously helpful for new GMs, especially.
Yeah, I'm interested to see all like how they approach that, just because I've always really liked Raging Swan Press. Because they have a lot of supplements that are just like, here's a town, and then you get breakdowns because usually it's like maybe like a 10 or 15 page PDF that they create for it, and you get all these breakdowns of various NPCs, the economy, like what the surrounding area should probably look like, and they do it in like system neutral ways as well. You can get a system neutral version of it, at least you used to be able to. So if it can be even sort of like their system for it, I'll be really happy with it, because it's really easy to understand.
Yeah, and this is kind of what I'm talking about. It's like all of these third-party publishers were like, this is an obvious gap that needs filling, and I think I've seen it from like 3 or 4 different publishing companies. Like Raging Swan Press is just one of them. I want to say I've seen it in a couple of other places as well. And it's like, of course, this is a tool that GMs need. GMs don't know how to build a city offhand. Like, even if you, like the two of us, were really into Age of Empires at one point, right? That's not necessarily a like really built, really developed town.
No, I'm gonna need at least 6 houses in the early game. I'm going to need my barracks and my archers and my blacksmith. And then I'm going to need some people to build walls, but not any kind of sensible walled settlement. I have to be economical about my stone use, so it's going to be on choke points surrounded by the trees.
I mean, that's kind of realistic. Let's be honest with ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, the concept of building an entire wall around your town entirely isn't all that realistic. You just want to make it so people can't march their armies right up into your town.
Yeah, and then they still roll their onagers right up to my wall and destroy them.
Well, there is that.
Yeah.
But my point being, even if you've played games where you are building a city for whatever reason,
Mhm.
like that doesn't mean that you're going to be good at building settlements. And so having some guidance as to like, here are some basics, here are some things you might consider adding. Here's a way to make part of this is making NPCs that
Mhm.
are maybe a little bit more memorable and a little bit like quest givers and things like that that the party can come back to and talk to time and time again. Like
Mhm.
all of that is hugely helpful for GMs and is something that I've seen in third-party publishers on multiple occasions. I have no idea why this is the
Mhm.
first time I'm seeing a lot of this in a WotC book. Like I've seen a little bit of when they're doing setting guides,
Mhm.
they'll explain why specific settlements have specific stuff in them, but not here's how you build a settlement inside your setting,
Mhm.
which is
And I
what I'm hoping for from this.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to get this in the weeds, or if they do, they might just sort of be brushing up against it. But taking sort of some more nuanced advice from like dungeon design that people tend to forget, like, yeah, you know, your dungeon's going to need multiple entrances and exits. Like, if you know, if it's a lich or something like that, like, yeah, they probably have a staff or something like that that's in there who's, you know, they're hired to harass people who come into the dungeon. They have to be like living places, like, and that's the kind of thing, because we conceive of these dungeons a lot as just this isolated thing that exists for this limited point in time while your party is going through it. But they're, you know, living, breathing things, and settlements are the same way. So I hope that the settlement guide is encouraging people to look at the economy of this place. Look, like, what are their major imports and exports? Like, what are the trade routes and stuff look like? You know, how, what kind of business are they getting that way? If it's a lumber oriented settlement, like, are they worried about like cutting their forests too quickly or something like that? How are they transporting the wood back? Just stuff that addresses the living, breathing nature of society, like waste removal and things like that too. Like, how is that handled? Because if it's a small settlement, they're not going to have any kind of sewage system or anything. Are people just dumping it out the windows? Are they dumping it in the river? Does that mean that they have to fish or get their drinking water from a certain point upriver? That kind of thing.
I strongly doubt that they will get quite that detailed.
I think if they, even if they just have a few sentences that are like, you got to think about this kind of stuff, that will be more than what I'm expecting them to put in there.
I was going to say, I do not anticipate even that level of detail. I'm anticipating, like, you should consider having a blacksmith shop so that your party can repair damaged weapons and armor on their
Well, see, that's the thing. Like, if that's the level they're going with for this, then it's useless. Then they should have just not done it, because that's just kind of like, that's really like no shit Sherlock kind of stuff. Like,
Well,
if
it's no shit Sherlock for us, but we've been running games for ages.
I
I'm
mean,
talking about something for someone who doesn't know what they're doing, who needs a hand.
I'm sorry, but if you're getting involved in a fantasy adventure game and you're making a town and you're like, never would have thought to put a blacksmith there, like, then there are other issues. Like, you need to read through the rest of the book first, and maybe some genre literature as well.
I will say, when you were talking about dungeons being living, breathing things, I was like, ooh, I wonder if we've got any Delicious in Dungeon fans in chat. Because that anime and manga, both, they're both great,
Mhm.
does a fantastic job of highlighting all of the, like, a dungeon is an ecosystem. It is
Mhm.
not a building with monsters in it. It is an
Right.
ecosystem that has to have some sort of functioning rotation in order to make
Mhm.
sense.
My preferred anime for dungeon related foodstuffs is Reborn as a Vending Machine, and I now wander the dungeon.
I haven't checked that one out yet, though I've heard it's better than it sounds like it should be.
Oh my god. Here's a bit of a tangent. Maybe we'll talk about this in a deep dive. But
Uh-huh.
I re-upped my Crunchyroll subscription a while back to watch an anime sequel to my favorite Kamen Rider series, Kamen Rider Double had an anime sequel, and while I was
Hell
watching it,
yeah.
so there was suggestions on the side, and I was like, oh, I've sort of vaguely heard about this vending machine anime on Reddit, and I watched the first couple of episodes. I was like, this is great. This is fantastic. It's only like 13 episodes. It's just such a wholesome story. And I sent it to a friend of mine who doesn't really like that kind of anime. And then I came back days later and he's like, this is amazing. I loved it. So if you enjoy vending machines, if you enjoy dungeons, you should definitely watch Reincarnated or Reborn as a Vending Machine. Now I wander the dungeon.
I need to, since you've got your Crunchyroll renewed, I need to tell you to go watch Kimono Michi Rise Up. I think that's the title, which is about a professional wrestler transported to a high fantasy world. And then
so can I sue them? Can I sue them?
I said transported to a high fantasy world, but was born there. It's fantastic. I think you'd enjoy it a great deal. It's very dumb, but a lot of fun.
I think if Crunchyroll categorized all of their, like, if they were just like put everything in a bucket of its genre, I think 99.9% of everything they had on there would be isekai.
There is a lot of isekai out there, and a lot of it is very bad. But getting back to getting off our Russian arcade museum for this episode and back onto the 2024 DMG, they are adding siege weapons, which I was like, wait, hold on, what? Like I saw the word flame throwing coaches. I was like, that sounds awesome.
They got Bobby Knight with like a propane tank on his back. Just fire.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued to see what adding things like trebuchets is going to do to people's game worlds.
It will revolutionize the party's transportation system. I'll tell you that. You hop into a trebuchet, get Featherfall cast on you.
Hell yeah.
It's like Secret of Mana cannon travel all over the place.
Speaking of cannons, they're adding guns. Did I read that correctly? The guns in here?
I saw that too. And to be clear, Josh and I are deriving much of our information from a couple of videos that D&D has put out over the last few days, like deep diving into the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide. And it's like Todd Kenrick, who's the head of their video department, doing interviews with like Chris Perkins and stuff. Todd's the guy you always see conducting the interviews when these things come out. And to be clear, as the head, if he's the head of their video department, he's actually doing a fantastic job because they put out so much good customer marketing material for every new thing that they've got coming out. So he's doing a fantastic job. But I didn't notice, like, I didn't see/hear the thing about guns, but I may have just been going really quickly through it. But I have to imagine that we're just talking like, you know, flintlock type stuff.
I mean, that's my assumption as well. They're not going to be like, and here to add to your swords and sorcery campaign are chain guns. Let's go.
Yeah. All of a sudden you've got a Duke Nukem campaign going on. But yeah, and that'll be interesting to see. I doubt it's going to be like really involved, but it would be interesting to see how that like dovetails a little bit with the firearm systems for like the low-tech firearm system for something like Nations and Cannons. Because, you know, they put a lot of work into building out sort of the most basic firearms that you can basic repeatable firearms that you can come up with. And I wonder if Wizards is like trying to reinvent the wheel there, or are they doing something that's mainly just like, okay, well, like here's the time it takes to reload for a black powder weapon that's roughly analogous to something you would have in the 1700s or something like that.
I suspect it's going to be black powder weapons. I can't imagine them going to something like repeaters already.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll see,
Yeah.
because
They're
all I saw was mention of firearms. I didn't
they're
even
not
get
quite
deep
ready
enough.
to come on down to History Town. Nations and Cannons. The lovely Nations and Cannons people were in the vendor hall with us when we were at BirdQuest in Williamsburg a few weeks ago, and the person who was manning their booth was just constantly, when people were walking by, like, "Come on down to History Town." And Nations and Cannon also markets itself officially as a tabletop role-playing game your dad would love, because it's just all about the Revolutionary War.
Yeah, if that is the market that they're looking to capture, I can only imagine that their World War II expansion is coming out soon.
Yeah. They're partnering with Paradox Studios. It's going to be released under like the White Wolf label now that Paradox owns that. But it'll be like Hearts of Iron, the role-playing game or something.
Oh my god. So I saw mention of firearms, which I'm excited to see exactly what they've got in mind there. Brave was actually just talking in the Discord the other day, bit.ly/goblin discord. Brave was just talking the other day about how we once we get things like firearms into base level D&D, it changes a lot of like how you view the industrialization of the campaign setting.
Yeah, I am not a fan of firearms in the game, except as like some sort of ultra powerful, like one-off kind of thing, like a real MacGuffin that you're going after, and you get it, and maybe you can use it once, and it's done. It fundamentally changes the nature of what you're trying to do, because like even like Eberron and the like the sort of magically induced industrial revolution setting going on there changes the nature of the game, because Eberron's just different. So I don't know how I feel about it, but my gut reaction is like there are other games for that, and firearms take a lot of the fun out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering if they're going to make it an optional rule. Like, here are firearms rules if you want to add them to your campaign, but they are not part of the base setting.
Oh yeah, they would. That would absolutely have to be the way to do it, and especially like if philosophically they're really going toward a more modular experience with insert current acceptable name of this iteration of Dungeons and Dragons versus the one that came out in 2014. You know, it's supposed to be backwards compatible. You're supposed to be able to choose to use or not use the new rules. So I would have to imagine that anything firearm oriented, regardless of that philosophy, would be purely optional. But it would not be my preference to use it, aside from something thematically appropriate, like maybe like a pirate's flintlock or something like that. Yeah. And if somebody wants to correct me that it is not actually a flintlock and is really like a blunderbuss or something like that, knock yourself out. I don't know anything about guns.
I think anything that is a like you cock the flint back and then you pull the trigger to make the flint strike black powder. I think those are all flintlocks, aren't they?
I think the technical term is pirate gun.
Get you a pirate gun. What's fun about this is that I can almost guarantee that someone is going to be in chat correcting us as they listen to the episode, because we know nothing about guns or gun history. And I'm excited to learn, quite frankly.
It's going to be one of those situations where somebody's like in the chat correcting it, and then they come back later and they're just like, oh, okay, I just now got to the part where you guys admitted you didn't know anything about guns and not to bother correcting us about this. That happens every once in a while.
It's my favorite is when we predict a comment we're going to get as someone is typing that comment while still listening to the episode. That is like, for me, that is the creme de la creme.
It's very much know your audience.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Another thing I haven't talked about yet is that they're adding bastions as an official rule set, which is basically player-based strongholds. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Brandon, we've had this in the rules before, haven't we?
Yeah, but I think it was sort of an expanded rule. Like you could sort of like how in second edition you could get the Thief's Handbook and it had all the different new Thief's archetypes that weren't in the PHB. I think if I recall correctly, and somebody please correct me if I'm wrong on this, like for second edition, for example, there was like a Cities and Strongholds separate book that was released sort of in the same product line as like those class handbooks that offered supporting rules for this stuff. I could be wrong, but I seem to recall that. But yeah, you're right. Regardless, you're right. This kind of stuff has been around for a while. But putting it in the official rule, like the official core rules, I think is the new thing.
Yeah, I just recall distinctly there was like there was like strongholds that you could have and how to build them, and then that was also there was like sidekick rules. I think that was 4E actually. 4E's when we had that, if I recall correctly.
Well, I'm not going to recall it all, so I hope you recall correctly.
I didn't play that much 4E, but I remember talking a lot about 4E with folks.
You know, once upon a time, I thought I played a lot of 4E, but it turns out I was just playing an Xbox game in the 2000s. It's easy to see how I could confuse myself there.
The more I heard about 4E, the more I was like, oh, so it's World of Warcraft, the tabletop role-playing game. Okay, got it.
Yeah. But I'll be interested to see how bastions work, because I have some thoughts about this, because I always like to go back to, and I don't know if the number is still accurate, but you know, very recently the average length of a campaign was like 6 or 7 sessions before, you know, the group falls apart, not the party, but the actual player group, because of scheduling. And having a bastion is really something that you need to have a very long-term situation going for, because it's like an out of session thing, where players can manage it. They can develop it, they can grow it, they can create backstories for like the hirelings they have running it, they can engage in stuff with them, and the houses will upgrade as they level up. I guess they'll have the options for that, which I both love and don't love, because I don't like the house being tied to like level based unlocks, because that feels very much like a video game thing that I it doesn't feel like it fits here for me. But maybe I'll read the rules and I'll be like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. But you know, I was playing years ago in a very long-term campaign, and we had a city that we created from whole cloth, and it was like an abandoned city, and we moved in and we started repairing it, hired crews and everything. And then we had a house there that we built, and every couple of sessions we would check in on it. We would make plans for expanding it, and obviously it would take time because you have to bring a crew in, you have to get materials, we have to pay for it and everything. But we played in that game for like 3 years. And I know a lot of people have long running tables, but a lot of people don't. And I don't think bastions are going to be useful unless you've got a long-term game going on. One interesting thing I did see, and there might be a way to incorporate this, I think it was in the YouTube comments for one of these videos, I saw somebody say like, oh, well, really just a dungeon is just a bastion gone bad. I'm like, oh, that's like, I like that. I like that a lot. So that might be a way to incorporate this, like at least the rules for building them or something. Like the GM could build one out and then maybe advance themselves by about 100 years and see how it degrades and it becomes just a scum of a hive of scum and villainy, that kind of thing.
A bastion of evil, you might say.
Exactly. and I know it sounds like I'm like really shitting on this, but I'm not. I'm really just sort of questioning the practicality of it in day-to-day gameplay. I think it's always cool when there's more options. I just wonder how many people will truly get to take advantage of this.
I mean, something I will point out, this is advice that I've been giving to GMs more recently, because scheduling is such a bear. It is so hard to get everybody together to sit down to play games, even though everybody wants to sit down and play games. You don't have to have the same party on every adventure.
Right.
You can have a rotating cast of characters that goes on different adventures. And if everybody meets up at the Bastion,
maybe it's your
and, like,
Adventurers Guild Hall or something.
exactly, like,
Yeah.
you're kind of operating your own Adventurers Guild Hall, and that's like how your party is assembled, and then your session
Your,
is the scenario that you're going out and running.
your
Like,
party,
I-
like your party are private security contractors, and the Bastion is their corporate headquarters.
I mean, if you think about adventuring parties as mercenaries, you're pretty close to on the money right there.
Pretty much, yeah. I have no shame about what I just said because it's 100% true.
So if you have something like, oh, the party builds out a bastion, and then they have kind of that central location to go back to and visit, then I mean, I could see that working out better for tables that are constantly rotating a couple of people in and out as they are available. And then I will say, and I hope that they put this in the book, is if you're going to have a rotating cast of characters, have everybody be the same level.
Yeah.
Because when somebody's like, oh, yeah, I had to miss the past like 3 sessions, I'm so glad to be back. Oh, you all are 2 levels higher than me now. Well, that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, that person's just going to have to have gone out and had their own adventures with a different party or something in the time being.
Something that does occur to me with regard to Bastions is that those crafting rules that you, I, and Tess were mocking a lot because they were kind of ludicrous.
Yeah.
Make a lot more sense if there's a centralized location you're always coming back to.
Yeah, that, and if you can set a hireling after something, that really feels like a loophole.
Yeah, there's a bit of that as well.
Yeah.
There's a bit of that as well.
Another thing I want to call out about this, and we talked about this sort of in some of the lead up episodes where we talked about this, but actual useful advice for GMs on crafting adventures for their games. And I think we talked about the idea that maybe they're going to be talking about it in terms of like, how do you create something modularly? And it sounds like they might be going in that direction because they're supposed to have like skeletal sample adventures that will let folks, use them for quick prep, maybe put some meat on them, that kind of thing. But it's almost like teaching by example how they're structuring them. I don't know if they'll specifically do it like almost literally with modules, like, okay, here's your intro, and that, almost going like sort of in sort of a storytelling arc, like here's your intro, here's the trouble, here's the accepting the call, and you all go out and do this thing, and then you have a combat to break it up, and then you do some exploration, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if that ends up being sort of like a tutorial for homebrewing and creating your own adventures, then I think that's super worth it.
Oh, 100%. And these are the sorts of things that I've always wanted out of the DMG, is not just like, oh, well, here's a reference guide of niche rules that you're not going to rely on very often. I think there's room for that, certainly. But I think the majority of the DMG should be, here is how you do your own thing with adventures and with setting things up and with running your table and building stuff out so that it feels more broad and more comprehensive. Like from day one, that's what I always thought the DMG would be.
Right.
And then was always a little disappointed when there was not more of that.
Yeah. And then on the flip side of that, though, like we talked about, they're including a full ass campaign setting in this with Greyhawk. Watching some of the video of the interview with Chris Perkins about it, he's basically saying like, it's a sandbox that we've created for you. We've put the toys in there. So it sounds to me that this stuff is going to work together this way, is you'll have the Greyhawk sandbox, and they'll have done the heavy lifting for you there. And then probably some of the skeletal adventures and the 5 like pre-existing adventures that are in there, if those are different from the skeletal ones as well, will be in that setting to help you get familiar with it. I'm of 2 minds about this because, like we've been talking about, the more content you can put in the DMG to make it valuable, the better. And giving a fledgling GM like a whole ass setting that has a history And it's like the 50th anniversary of D&D, so the Greyhawk being the first official setting, it makes sense for that to be in there, right? But is this giving short shrift to Greyhawk? Does this mean we're not going to get like a legit standalone Greyhawk release? Which this would have been the year to do it, so obviously they're not going to, obviously that's not going to happen this year. But I just wonder if this is like just not respecting Greyhawk's place in the history by just jamming it in there, and then not, because I haven't seen anything about them announcing like a separate Greyhawk release.
No, they've got the thing they've got coming up is a Forgotten Realms settings guide, which is
God knows we don't have enough of those.
Well, they are at least getting broader than the Sword Coast adventure guide that they did recently.
Right.
So thank goodness for that, at least. But like, yeah, I would like to see Greyhawk explored a little bit more fully. And that is at least one of the IP that they have access to that is not inherently problematic. That has people who are fans who want to see it return. So I feel like the money's there. They're going to do something with it. I just hope it's sooner than later.
Yeah. Yeah. And, maybe this is almost sort of a tease for it. Like they're like, oh, let's see how people react on social media to the Greyhawk materials we provide for this. Because I guess it's fair to say that like most people playing today, like the vast majority of people playing today, were not alive when Greyhawk was out.
Well, and a lot of the people who are playing today are only familiar with Forgotten Realms.
And whose fault is that?
As a setting. I'm with you on this.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, they did I was saying this in Discord the other day as well. They did the Marvel Cinematic Universe thing where they're like, all right, we figured out exactly how to print money, and we're just going to keep doing it forever. And then as interest slowly like wanes and wanes and wanes, they're like, that's so strange, but you loved the first Avengers movie.
Right.
It's like, yeah, the first one. Then you did it 4 more times, and it's like, well, I don't know. This is all right, I guess.
Yeah. Just some other stuff I want to make sure we hit before we get to like the end of things. Just generally there do seem to be like more tools that are designed to help GMs like craft stories, and I'm creating sort of a differentiation there between like running an adventure versus like creating a story. Like it's giving like it's consolidating content from 2014 and adding like other stuff, like advising you how to run character death scenes and how to get stuff out of your players for that. Alignment dynamics, which is another one of those things where it's like, who really plays alignment? Like who really plays rules as written alignment? I don't think, and this is maybe my own biases, but I really don't think anybody does. I really don't.
Alignment should be a graph, not a thing that you just stay.
Yeah. And then also like it says, quote, advanced discussions on topics like curses and magical contagions, which I like, because if you can give me a curse that's more than just a mechanical debuff or something like that, really like build a story behind it, I'm going to be way more invested in that, and I'm going to hate it more. I'm going to like love to hate it, I think. What other stuff was on your list that you wanted to get into about this?
I mean, I didn't want to get too deep on anything since you and I have not looked at any of this ourselves, but I think I've touched everything I wanted to like brush by. There's a few things that I'm really excited to see what it is, and there's a few things where I'm like, well, hopefully this is better than it sounds.
Yeah. I think we'll probably try and grab it on the 29th if we can, digitally, and be able to go through it and really see what's there. And maybe we have a conversation about that on the main podcast. Maybe we put that in a deep dive or something on the Patreon, just because I'd hate to like overload us with that. Because like this episode is going to come out October 21st. Is that correct? Yep.
That sounds right.
This is coming out the 21st, and then that'll come out, several days later, and it just feels like having 2 back-to-back DMG episodes wouldn't be great, but we wanted to go ahead and get this out beforehand before the earliest people got access to it.
Well, and as a little gentle reminder, like, if you are someone like me who insists on physical where possible, reach out to your friendly local gaming store, see if they're going to get it early.
Yeah, definitely give them a call. So do you want to wrap it up there? We're at about an hour.
Yeah, I think that's plenty of content about a thing neither of us has seen and exclusively is reporting on secondhand reports.
Yeah. What I would like is for folks on Discord to let us know what they're looking forward to the most from this, what they're not looking forward to, or what they're afraid of in this. How do you think it's going to be beneficial? Or how do you think this is going to degrade Dungeons and Dragons even further? Hop into the Discord, bit.ly/Goblin Discord. Go to the GGP channel. What did you call that channel? Is it just G&G Podcast?
I think it's just the G&G Podcast. Yeah.
Hop in there and let us know what you think, and also throw some comments up on the YouTube when the video version of it comes out as well, because we want to hear what other people are saying, because we want to have preconceived notions before we actually go in and read it. Just like any fair-minded reviewer.
Well, here's the thing I would say on that is that we can collect everything that folks talk about, and then we can take that information into the episode where we actually read the book, and we can either confirm or deny people's suspicions.
Yeah, I'm gonna get a screen cap of you going thumbs down, and I'll use that. I'll use that for the thumbnail.
This is what Josh thinks about what he's heard about the DMG.
Yeah, Josh, is there anything else that they need to know?
Oh, there's lots of things that they need to know aside from like us talking about the DMG on Discord and making wild speculation. Well, not super wild, because we got some info. Which, by the way, if they want to join the conversation, it's bit.ly/Goblin Discord. The big thing that everybody has to know is that they should telephone, telegraph, tell a friend about the Goblins and Growlers podcast.
Yeah, I'm thinking about getting shirts made.
I tripped over growlers. I was like, I'm going to see how fast I can do this. And then growlers came out like garlers. I don't know.
Try and say it 3 times fast.
Telephone, telegraph, tell a friend about the Goblins and Growlers podcast. Telephone, telegraph, tell a friend about the Goblins and Growlers podcast. Telephone, telegraph, tell a friend about the Goblins and Growlers podcast.
There you go.
How is it I did it that much better those 3 times? Whatever. All right.
Scott can dub over it.
That is, word of mouth is not just the best Ludicrous album, it is also the best way to spread the news about our lovely show. If you love it, give us a 5-star review, share it with your friends, share it with your family, put MP3 players, I know they're hard to find at this point, but put them on bus stops loaded with the entire library. Whatever you got to do. If you do not feel like the show is worth spreading, or a 5-star review or a thumbs up on Spotify or whatever the rating medium may be, come to the Discord and have a conversation with us about it, because I'm open to constructive criticism. Don't be mean, but yeah, we can have a conversation about what's driving you crazy about the show, and then maybe we make some production improvements. Who's to say?
Yeah, I'll also steal something from Noah. If you are going to check out the podcast, download the entire run of it. That's a fantastic way to boost our numbers and give you a wide menu of episodes from which to sample, which is exactly what somebody is doing today, according to me looking at the podcast metrics.
They predicted you. They predicted you almost a week and a half in advance. It's amazing. You should go and check out the Linktree, linktr.ee/goblins and growlers. That is where you can find all the information about our social media presences, our website, and the link to the newsletter, which Brandon produces. It comes out once a month. It is a very quick read. It's always got a little bit of interesting information about current goings on in TTRPG, and as well as you're still doing an indie game as well in every newsletter, aren't you?
Trying to, as long as there's something interesting that catches my eye.
And if you would like to see a specific indie game highlighted in the newsletter, then you should post about it in the Goblins and Growlers podcast chat in the Discord, or send it to Brandon on social media, because we love getting submissions from people, because we have 4 eyes between the two of us. We can only perceive so much things in a given day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you hit me up on the Goblins and Growlers Discord, I am master of dungeon administration.
Although if you at Way of Brandalore, you'll still get him. So
yeah,
either works.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, I think we're good. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, all that stuff. One more time, telephone, telegraph, tell a friend. But we will catch up to everybody later, and who knows what the deep dives from this episode are going to be.
I mean, I can think of at least one, but
tell me what it is. Tell me what it is. It'll be a teaser.
It'll be wild speculation about what we anticipate and what we would put into the DMG if we were given our druthers.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. All right. Well, we'll talk to everybody later.
Bye, y'all.
If you like tabletop games like Dungeons and Dragons, you probably love thinking about your character's stats, and one way or another, taking a chance on your probability of success or failure. Underdog Fantasy lets you have that same experience with your favorite sports ball players.
With Underdog Fantasy, you can draft your lineup and build your adventuring party. Every pick'em entry could mean the difference between victory and defeat, and you don't get bardic inspiration here. Whether you're a veteran player or a newbie, Underdog Fantasy has the perfect contest for you.
They've got quests for every type of player, whether you're into football, basketball, baseball, and many other sports. You can enter its daily contests, pick'em contests, or dive into a season-long campaign with no salary caps and no long-term commitments. Just draft, strategize, and let the games begin.
So head to underdogfantasy.com or download the app and sign up with the promo code MCA. That's the acronym May Contain Action to start your adventure today and claim your special pick and first-time deposit offer of up to $250 in bonus cash. Underdog Fantasy is where underdogs become legends.
Participants must be 18 or older, 21 or older in Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 or older in Alabama and Nebraska, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. If you or a loved one are concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER. That's 1-800-426-2537. Or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, you can call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. That's 1-800-639-8783. Or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY. Or text HOPE-NY 467-369.